Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
So I wanted to start off by asking you specifically what it was that you worked on, like what sequences you worked on for Godzilla versus Kong. That way, we don't ask you a bunch of questions based on stuff you didn't do.
Yeah, sure. We did so Godzilla arriving in Hong Kong. So that's the sequence where he's in the canal, the river, and he destroyed the bridge, and then he enters the city. Basically, you see his foot stomping. And there's crowd running, and then there's Godzilla boring the hole, and then Kong is coming out. So Kong is coming from the Hollow Earth, which is Weta. So we're taking over as he comes out, and we did all the night stuff in the city with the neons, and we did the sequence called Kong's Revival, where he's that's when he gets the electroshock on the chest. And he has a chat with Gia, and where the city is burning in the back, and then he replaces his shoulder with the crash zoom, and that's the last shot that we worked on.
The stuff when you did on the ship, like you said, in the water, is that something that you did on your own, or were you looking at like stuff from Kong Skull Island when you did the Kong features on this?
Well, the model was made by Scanline, but I mean, I'll let them answer this, but it was inspired by the Kong Skull Island. But I think, this movie has a bit of a different style. I mean, it's more or less the same, monster, like the universe monster, but the monsterverse, I'm not sure how to answer it in a way that it makes sense. I think the movie is more of its own, it doesn't really, there's not a lot of attached, reference to Kong Skull Island, no.
Right, definitely. Yeah, I didn't know if you guys used like storyboard art or anything like that from those, because you were featuring the same character. Obviously, there's a lot of visuals that are a little bit different.
No, the way that we work, there's a previous team. It's like an animated storyboard. So the previous team would kind of like block the generic action and timing of what's supposed to happen and layouts. And that's kind of like how our sequence started. So from, Godzilla arriving to Hong Kong, and then Kong coming out, and then the fight sequence that, we went at MPC, we went, a lot more in detail, but everything usually it's the blocking comes from a previous company, which was MPC in LA.
Nice. And then you also, I believe you worked on another Godzilla film in the past. So this isn't the first movie where you had to do stuff with Godzilla. So I'm not surprised that you worked with Godzilla so much. Was there anything that you did that kind of echoed something that happened in the past, or were you using techniques that you did in the last Godzilla movie when you worked on certain parts of this, or is this something that you had so much new technology at your disposal that it was like a completely different experience?
It's, the MPC was the designer of the Godzilla as we know it right now. I think it was 2014, the Gareth Edwards one. So I think in that movie, we were kind of like introducing the look for the atomic beam, right? And his surge, he gets that biolume look. And then in the, what's the one after Godzilla, King of Monsters, then he had some different levels of biolume. So I think for our movie, what we do is like, well, because the resolution was much higher than the previous movie, was close to 4K. So, we always try to keep the asset up to date. So we're using like the latest like muscle system, and the latest, the texture work. We've redone like the close-up for the eyes and stuff like this. So the asset always gets improved, We also, for this movie, we reworked the atomic beam. Looks quite different because we had to do shots where Kong is super far away. So he's using his beam less of a blast, but it's more like a sniper, right? So it has more of like a laser core. So I thought that, for scale and for accuracy, the look of the beam should be more precise, less fiery, a bit more like plasma. So that's something that we rework quite a bit. And then, Godzilla is kind of like, I think his performance are slightly different. His level of aggression is the first time we see him on four legs, like a crocodile. There's a part where he tries to bite Kong's foot, is very like, so yeah, there was a bit of exploration in animation in that movie as well.
Nice. And when you did that part, when you had Godzilla on all four legs, did you look to any specific creatures? Because I know when we talked to Scanline, they had mentioned like I think Galapagos sea turtles and like studying certain animals and the way that they moved in the water. So having, bringing a new look to Godzilla, did you guys just do what you thought that he would look like, since it is kind of like a mythical creature, or was it something that you looked to certain similar animals to see how they moved?
We did look. I mean, he's a bit limited because of his front legs are quite short, but we tried to give him. We looked at alligators and Komodo dragon, so they have that kind of like rapid aggressive stance where they're super fast on short distance. So that was our main reference. I mean, we tried to pose him with like the elbow out so he looks a bit more massive. And then, he has kind of like that sharp bite, that snappy, kind of like turtle bite. But I think Komodo dragon, I'd say, was like our biggest reference.
That's awesome. Sorry, Joe, you're still on mute there, just in case.
Yeah, no, I was going to let Nick go next. Nick's a huge Godzilla fan, so I figured I'd let him take over as far as some of the Godzilla-centric questions and just in general here for a sec. So I'm going to mute myself and let Nick get some of the interesting questions in there.
Yeah. First off, great job. Looks awesome. As one of my favorite sequence in the whole movie was when they were in Hong Kong. So I was having a good time from start to end with that. But I mean, just kind of walking through the scene, pun intended. What was it like, kind of creating that bridge? Because I remember for me, for some reason it just stuck out when Godzilla emerged from the water and just kind of struck the bridge like it was nothing, because he was focused. What was it like having to create that bridge and all of like? I mean, I saw cars falling mixed with the debris, mixed with particles. Like, was that challenging for you?
Definitely. I mean, Godzilla is kind of like he's a force of nature, so he doesn't really think or like care about, we say like Kong is a bit more self-aware of his environment. He'll use the building to do like parkour stuff, and Godzilla is a bit more of a bulldozer. He has one thing in mind, and there's nothing really that stops him. So he was a bit more careless in terms of damage. So he's the one that created us the more work, because a bit heavier and his hips are a bit bigger and he needs that extra room.
Yeah, and I noticed that too. He's very he like you said, he's just a lot more aggressive in this one. I felt like in the last one he had not that he was lacking personality, but he was a lot more primal in this one, and I think it showed for sure. Like when he was crashing through the bridge and everything. And then there was the shot that you talked about where he stomped into the city. For me, it kind of reminded me of, and maybe it was just a classic monster movie trope, but it kind of brought me back to like when I was a kid and I watched like that 1990s Godzilla or even Jurassic Park. And was that particular shot where he's stepping, was that inspired by anything in particular, or was that just kind of off the cuff for you guys?
The stepping on the chest?
No, when he's like when he gets into Hong Kong and he like does that one shot of his foot and
with the tail whip,
like shakes.
There's a tail whip in the back, and there's cars exploding. I think the inspiration for that scene is it's a bit like a standoff. I'm not gonna call it. The proper, don't quote me. It's a Mexican standoff. I'm gonna call it a duel. Okay. So in the old spaghetti western, they used to call them, Mexican standoff, but for the interview, we'll call them like a duo. So that was the inspiration. So I think, just to, when like two cowboys stand out, one will do something with his gun, and the other one will just spit on the ground or something. Mm-hmm. So I think, the standoff in Hong Kong, where the city is still in, the light show is going on and there's not much destruction yet. So I think what we thought about were, Kong with his axe would do something a bit more, like a warrior would do, where he would just like slam it on the ground and do like the chest pump.
I love that part too.
And I mean, Godzilla is he has the atomic breath, but he's a bit more limited. So the tail whip was kind of like his showing of aggression, of like, his kind of like, testosterone moment, where it's basically just to show off. It's like intimidation, basically, before a fight, before a brawl.
Yeah, and that looks so cool too. That's what I love about these movies as well, is just how they're obviously giant monsters, but they're still animals. And I love how like scenes like that, where they're posturing themselves as their species, I guess, would. And it looked awesome. And like Joe mentioned, you worked on the original Godzilla that came out in 2014. And I know design wise, I know you guys didn't really mess with his design too much, but I know Godzilla matured over those movies.
Yeah.
Did you find any differences from what you remembered when you had to create that Godzilla versus this one that you kind of noticed was changed?
I didn't. I was working in environment back then. Was like an environment lead. So, but I remember when the first Godzilla was made, I think over the years, what we're adding to him was a bit like Kong from Skull Island. Kong changed a bit, and Godzilla, he has a bit more scar. He has a bit more, his fins are getting a bit more, not erosion, but scratches. I mean, more like exposed. And you also have a bit more, what it's called, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's barnacles. The little, seashell that gets stuck, to stuff to him. So I think that's kind of like the evolution he has. He has a different biolume, like I was mentioning, biolume signature. Where in this movie, because his atomic breath is so intense, in the previous movie, he used it more as a very short distance, right? And because in this movie, he's using it like to drill in the ground. And so you see a lot more of his internal glowing. So we build like a skeleton and a vein system. I think that was shared with the Scanline as well.
Yeah.
So he has, his biolume look has been improved, but I think let's just say he has like a different biolume style. So.
Okay, definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense too. And I actually had just a couple more questions. A lot of it honestly had to do with more lighting as well. But with the neon, and especially because you guys said that you guys did the scene where he drilled the hole into the hollow earth with his atomic breath. What was it like having to create these characters and reflect off of all of that neon, because there's so many colors going on there?
It was, I mean, the city build, I mean, to me was, it's like the third character for us, because we had our there's two monsters, but there's also the city, and some of our biggest challenge was because some of the note we had from the previous movie, where in this movie, we needed to see the action, because it's a different type of fights. It's not we didn't want to obscure them in smoke or mist. So I think the creative goal was to really showcase the action. So we had, funky camera moves and different perspectives, and the type of fight is super aggressive. So we didn't want to hide anything. As much as we do a lot of destruction, there's not a lot of like smoke that hides anything. So to answer your question, I think that the city having the neon lighting the monster was a way to showcase them. So the tricky part is there was a bit of a gamble where we had to finish to design the city to know how they would look. Because one of the cool thing, and it could have been like a double-edged sword, was we didn't do much lighting. We just let the city light the characters. So it was a bit of let's do cool neon design and let's just see how they look when they're in there. And it ended up being pretty cool, because when they start in downtown, it has a bit more of that classic, LED blue lights, lots of light show laser. And as they start to fight, there's more destruction happening. So there's a bit more a combination of firelight happening. So you'll see that at the beginning it's quite eclectic. There's lots of acidic colors and, orange, greens, and blue and purple. And then by the end, the director Adam kind of called it and Adam and DJ, John Desjardins was our high-end suit. We called it the Inferno, which was, kind of like he's getting to the red zone, the hot zone where the explosion happened. So surprisingly, by default, we ended up with, a very, busy metropolis type of look. And as the destruction progressed in our sequence, there's a lot more firelight coming in. So we would always have a combination of like purple, orange, green, orange, blue, orange. But the theme of the fire and the Inferno kind of like, it's like a natural progression as you watch the sequence, basically. So kind of like answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it explained to me in detail just how much detail is into that. And I mean, it shows because holy cow, there's so many colors going on there. I have one more question before I pass it off to Joe, because I talked for a bit myself. If you guys worked on it, if not, then, I guess whatever you may have worked on around it, but that terrifying smile that Godzilla had in the movie, was that you guys? Because what can you talk about with that? Because that was one of the scariest and coolest parts to me.
Where he has a bit of that evil laugh.
And that, like the little laugh and the grin. I mean, like he just looked so sinister.
It's part of the liberties we got to explore where, it's a bit of a, how do you call that in English? Is they're not chasing each other in this city. And I think, Godzillas have issue because in the way they introduce them in the movie is like, Godzilla wins the first round, which is on the boat. And then the second round is where Kong is a bit more agile and he can take advantage of his environment. So I think that the smile that you see in Godzilla is like, finally, I got a piece of you. It's basically that. And because it's so, he's so poised and always, he's a reptile. He doesn't have like a lot of range. So I didn't know until I saw the movie with the audio, because we do get temp sound. So it helps for the explosion and Kong obviously is like monkey sound. So it's okay. But Godzilla usually has more of that, crazy roar. So, and then when I heard the laugh, I was like, this is so cool. it brought it to like a creepy level. Like it's like, very good.
He seemed like such a bully and it was just so scary. And like I look at that on YouTube. I'm like, I gotta watch this over and over. Like this is so awesome.
But it's good. It's not overdone. It's quite subtle. If you pay attention, if you don't pay attention, you don't really hear it. But it has like that little like rumble that feels like a laugh, which is quite good.
Yeah, very, very creepy. But yeah, thank you for that. I'll pass it off to Joe now. That was awesome.
Yeah, killer on all fronts with the work you guys did. But I wanted to know, as far as like the visual like landscape of like the bridge and the city and everything, did you visit any places in particular to get a feel, like actually physically visit any places in particular to get a feel of similar locations to what you were trying to build? Or did you look up a lot of imagery online? Yeah,
we did spend like almost 6 weeks in Hong Kong. Shooting, like doing surveys of buildings, and we would get like a permit to access rooftop and stuff like this, and we have a system of EnviroCam. So it's basically like super high-res tiling that we can line up on geometry. So basically that's how we kind of rebuild the building. I think we did, because of how stylized it is, we did end up like replacing quite a bit. I think just to make sure, it's inspired by Hong Kong, but it also had to become like a playground. So we did modify some building height so we can reach to them, or we did completely redesign with the neon some signs. So there's lots of custom design signs that could have a lot of, I think the goal was to create lots of world noise. So it looks like habited, the light show is typical to Hong Kong, but it was kind of like modernized for a movie.
Yeah, it definitely came across. I loved it. I love the design. I love the aesthetic there. And to wrap up as far as Godzilla versus Kong goes, before I let you go, is there anything we didn't touch on or ask about Godzilla versus Kong specifically that you wanted to say? I always like to give a platform to people for anything that people don't ever ask you that you would like to include?
I mean, there's some highlights in this movie where I think that the animation team and the whole CG team got to be quite creative. You know, it's not every movie that, you know, we really enjoy the process. You know, there's some masterpiece that you end up winning an Oscar, but, you know, the production was not necessarily, you guys can phrase it in a more, you know, poetic way or a more, but I think what I'm trying to say is it was a movie where, you know, we had, you know, the mandate from the DJ and Adam was to go all out, right? To create like a relentless fight where, you know, you almost feel like you're tired, you know, you feel bad for the monsters because, and it was a bit of a strategy of the director to, you know, create like two rams that go at each other at all time, you know, and just before the final act. So I think, you know, it was quite a great experience to be part of it, and that they trusted us and give us the liberty to propose idea and design cameras, and, you know, the animation team did a great job at the choreography and bringing, you know, tons of reference of how Kong could use his environment and how, you know, how ferocious Godzilla could get back up every time, you know, without, you know.
And it's so fun. So as a fan for yourself, are you Team Godzilla or are you Team Kong?
It's a tough question. I think
it's like picking between your kids, huh?
Yeah. I think for this one, Team Kong.
Yeah, I love it.
For this one, you know, I think you have Godzilla forever in your heart. You know, if you do you need a Godzilla, you need Godzilla for every Godzilla movie. You don't need Kong for every Godzilla movie. So I think,
well put.
I hope he's gonna be back, but we'll give a chance to another one.
Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast.